good with it.
It's very flattering.
Well, thank you. It's also easy to upkeep.
Yeah. Who has not read The Purpose lately? I don't keep track. Or who wants to?
So
Someone say
I
me.
can.
Who is it? Thank you, Gina. Okay.
we are
I've
live.
got it up here.
You ready?
Yep.
All right. Good evening and welcome to the July 27th work session of the Ames Community School District Board of Directors. I'll entertain approval of the agenda.
I move we approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Moved by Bankin, seconded by Colton. I think I heard you. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Director Perez, will you please read the purpose statement?
The Ames Community School District commits to equity and access that empowers every individual to reach their full personal and educational potential.
Thank you very much. And we appreciate everyone being here, making this work for your schedules, to just have some additional time to have a discussion about the Return to Learn plan and all that is going on. So I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Reisner. She had a few things that she wanted to say, and then we will have a discussion.
Sure. So I think tonight what was proposed really was about giving you all an opportunity to talk and ask questions. So talk with each other, ask questions of us. If you have more questions, which I'm sure you do, and just really giving you time to look at how you're feeling, what your thoughts are around Return to Learn, our delivery model. So the other thing I thought would be really important tonight, in addition to the delivery model, would be just to return to the conversation around timeline, because I think that we are very open to whatever works best for the board and whatever they feel time-wise that they need. And if we don't have the information yet that is needed to make a decision, I think it's just fine to stick with our original timeline. One of the things I had talked about earlier today in another conversation was there were many school districts that were very early in adopting a model. We took a different approach, which I'm really proud of the work that we've done. Rather than be quick, we were really slow and methodical and put out a very, very detailed, comprehensive plan. And so our goal was not to rush it to the board. Our goal was really to take all of the time that we could to deliver a really strong product, which we did on July 1st, which was approved. And then, as you know, with the governor's proclamation, I think she took a different spin on House File or Senate File 2310 maybe. And we were then, there were new rules put into place, which meant districts had to go back and tweak those plans, which we've been in the process of doing. I think I say that all of that because with that timeline and with the process that we went through, being a very comprehensive, lengthy process, it did give us the opportunity to not be in the position some districts are finding themselves in, where they already have a board approved model that now doesn't meet the governor's proclamation. So, you know, I think there's wisdom in both, and you can't, I feel like you can't foresee the future. You just have to, you know, here's the best information we have today, and we know that that information certainly could change, but as we know today, this is what the information we have before us. So I think those are really the two goals for tonight. Just talking about your thoughts around the delivery model, and then your thoughts around a timeline. And one other, I guess one other thing I would add, our goal tonight as directors is to be here as a resource if you need us. But really, I'm going to try really hard tonight to focus in on the listening aspect of it, because I think we get caught up in the problem solving because by nature that's our role. And so there is a lot of wisdom tonight in you being able to talk with each other, like we have been doing since March every morning at 9 a.m. when we meet as directors. And so it helps to be able to have those deep conversations. It also helps us too to be able to listen to your thoughts, and that will help guide the delivery of information in a way I think that will benefit you and the community.
Thank you for giving everybody kind of an overview and thoughts on how we wanted to proceed tonight. So I think, are there first any questions on kind of what our process is in terms of just in general tonight? Otherwise, if there are none, I want to go ahead and open it up to board members. Are there questions that you have? Is there additional information as you're thinking through, I think the two goals that Superintendent Reisner talked about in terms of where we are with our delivery model and the timeline, and thinking through what that is looking like, and if there are any adjustments that you may think might be beneficial.
So I'm happy to jump in. I'm really looking forward to this. I want to thank everybody who pulled this together on such short notice. I have just been wanting to know what my fellow board members have been thinking. The reason I wanted to jump in first is because I wanted to dovetail on what Superintendent Reisner said. You know, I feel like maybe 2 weeks ago, I think the board was in a position where it felt very strongly about the model that we needed to be in. And I'm not saying that that's changed or not changed, because I don't know what you all are thinking, but I do feel like I've at least had some shift in my own thinking. I think primarily because I had always been waiting for the metrics to make the decision, which will be closer, and then apparently whatever. But I think since my understanding of what the governor's proclamation now means for in-person instruction, I have just really been thinking, from my perspective, how do we walk through this crisis in our values? How do we walk through this crisis or this mandate with an equity lens? And so in terms of what I want to kind of talk to the board first and hear, is there any interest in asking the district to really continue to invest in some kind of phased reopening? And what I'm thinking is, the more I thought about it, from my perspective, there are some students who need to be in school. And these are students who have, level 3 special education needs. These are students who we know have, IEPs that require intensive services. These are students who have consistently demonstrated large academic disparities. And so I'm wondering, had we considered a way to prioritize in-person access for the students who need it the most? Because what I hope is that as we have this discussion, whatever model we land on, I also want to try to find ways we can sustain it. Part of what I'm worried about is that if everybody comes to school, I think 75% of our parents said they were interested in on-site instruction. If 75% of students come back to school all at once, I worry we'll be shut down. And let's say 60% of those 75% will be fine, but those other 15% won't. And so I'm trying to figure where I'm coming at this from now is, how do we buy time for students who need it? And so that's how I'm entering this conversation.
Feel free to jump in. I see Jamette, you just unmuted, so
Yep.
go ahead.
Yeah. I appreciate your comments, Director Benken. I have been wondering a lot about, so first of all, I think just by communication I got today, I think some parents don't know yet that we cannot do online for all of our students. So I think maybe we need to put more clarity in that, because I got a text saying, I trust what the board will do. And if it's 100% online, it's 100% online. So I think there's misunderstanding in that. And I appreciate the comments, Director Benken, because I am wondering about how are we serving those that need to be in the building? They need to be seen. And I'd be interested to see if we have any alternatives. I've thought, do we have any alternatives to just go online for 100%? So I would be curious to talk about that.
That made me think of something else too, about how lunch would be done for the students that are online, that are like free and reduced lunch, because we want to make sure that their needs are met too for food and other things. I know that we're continuing to do like the baskets for people that need help. How long are we going to do those for?
Is that a question, like a question?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know if it was like a question to.
It's a question.
Or, I don't know that we have set an end date. Dr. Jones, I'm going to ask you to jump in on that one. I know that we are doing them through the maybe first week of August, and then I think that we have to have space in the buildings to do other work. So Dr. Jones, do you want to jump in on that?
Yes. This Wednesday, the 29th, is actually our last day providing the food boxes for the summer. However, we are more than able and have donations ready to start up again in the fall. Again, the community and the way they just jumped in and gave was really exciting and encouraging to see. And the work of our homeless liaison and our student family advocates and our volunteers have done a great job of getting food out to our families. So that area, those staff members are already locked and loaded and prepared to respond. We just have to make sure that we are being fiscally responsible as far as making sure that we're balancing the funds that we have, as well as being able to reach out and communicate with our community for support.
Would you like me to take a shot at lunches, Dr. or Superintendent Reisner?
Sure, sure.
Okay. So right now, since the closure in March, we've been acting under a provision of the summer food program, which is the open sites, and any child 18 and under that goes to those sites can get a lunch, and they waived that the children have to be present, and they waived the time between meals. So we were able to give lunch and breakfast at the same time, and it could be the parent or caregiver that could come get those meals. Once we're no longer in the summer and we're back at school and we're not under a governor's closure under an emergency proclamation, we revert back to the National School Lunch and Breakfast Program. Under that, we can, they have waived the time between meals, and they have waived the congregate seating or the congregate serving. So if, for instance, we were in a hybrid model and certain students weren't there on certain days, we can still offer them meals, but it goes under the National School and Lunch Breakfast Program. So rather than a parent or a guardian or a caregiver driving up and just asking for the number of meals they get, we would actually have to ask which students they're coming for. We'd have to mark them. It would get charged as if they were going through the lunch line. So if I'm free, we run it through our system, their lunch is free. If they're reduced, it runs through our system, they get charged the reduced amount. And if they're paid, it runs through our system and they get charged the paid amount. It's one of the reasons why we asked on the survey, the student survey for the online learning, is whether they wanted to take part of our lunch program, so we'd have an idea of how many families might want to participate in that program, because we suspected there might be a number that if they're keeping their kids home wouldn't be interested in participating in it. Our thoughts at this point, we're still trying to work out all the logistics, but our thought would be that we would try to serve breakfast between the meals between 9 and 10. And they would go to their individual schools. They would drive up. If we're in the hybrid, we could serve the kids that weren't there that day, and we can certainly serve the kids that are online. Our thought is we'd get the morning traffic out of the way and we'd get it done before lunch starts so that we have enough lunch staff. But it would kind of work the same way that it is now with the grab and go meals, except that it runs through National Breakfast and it's not just a free meal.
Chris, I'm sorry, can I follow up on that? I'm not understanding what you're saying, because what I hear you saying is if a parent chooses the parent choice online and yet their child is entitled to receive free lunch from the school, that parent would have to somehow transport that child to the building? Wait,
No.
help me understand. I'm not understanding.
So they've waived the child being present, and they've waived the parent having to, or guardian having to be there. So it could be a caregiver, it could be a daycare, or a babysitter, an older sibling that might be able, but they do have to come get the meals. And we have to.
This is daily, because before you were giving 5 days worth. It's daily.
No, we've never done that. We've always done this daily.
So then it's daily. Someone would have to come daily and they could get.
We've been doing weekend meals. We would not be able to do that under the National School and Lunch Breakfast Program.
So if a parent chooses the online parent option, and their child is entitled to or eligible to receive a free lunch, someone would have to come on a daily basis to get the meal, but they could get 2 meals at once. Is that correct?
They would get breakfast and lunch together, yes.
And they would have to do it 5 days a week.
Yes.
Okay.
Which, just to clarify, that is currently what families are doing now. I think where the confusion is coming is there's the difference between the daily meals and then the boxes. I think that's where the
The boxes are through the pantry. That's not part of our program. The big difference is the summer food program. If it's an open eligible site, which our sites are, any child who comes, any parent who comes for a child 18 and under, those meals are free, regardless of your eligibility. When it goes back to the National Lunch and Breakfast Program, the eligibility kicks in. That's the big difference. And only would we revert back to the system we're on right now is if we were 100% online due to a governor order closure under a national emergency. And right now, the waivers only go through December 31st. So those waivers would have to be extended for the second half of the year for us to be able to continue to do that, if we would happen to be in a hybrid after that point.
So if I can jump back to what Director Bankin kind of brought up. The thing I think I'm struggling with is understanding where we're at, really. We have to operate under the assumption that we can't do anything. We can't have online. We can't mandate it for the district. We couldn't have really just a select group of students there. That where we're at right now, we have to be ready to open for anyone who wants to be there. And I think that's where, I feel like I'm running up against a wall. That would not be my choice of, if we had a choice, if we were able to actually choose which of the models we wanted to go with, that would not be my choice. So are we talking about investigating ways to mandate online, but then providing for students who need to be in person? I'm just not really sure where we're starting this conversation from. If we're starting it from the idea that all options are on the table, or are we starting it from the idea that we can only, the best we can do is hybrid with 50% instruction in person?
Thank you. You make a really good point. What Director Benkin described is what I took to the Department of Education last week. We are not allowed to do that. So that got no-go'd. We are, it is in direct, sorry about that. It is in direct violation of Senate File 2310. So, or let me correct that. The interpretation by the Department of Education, their interpretation of 2310. So the guidance that districts have been given, which guidance, think about that more as the directive that we have been given, is that you have to have 50% of the students who are not participating under a medical waiver for online or a parent choice for online. You must have 50% of those students instruction done in a face-to-face model. So that is really the starting place probably for our conversation, because the gradual release of coming back to school has been taken off our plate. We were given a no, that we could not do that.
I thought if I thought you said that it would be possible if our metrics, once we could have that, it would be a formal no once we had our metrics out.
A formal no for returning all of our students to online. So two different things. So one request would be for us to begin instruction all online. So that would be, and then within that model, the metrics would have to indicate that we could go into that online learning mode. If we are not in that online learning mode, then we have to take whatever percentage of our students are not, I know how confusing this is, whatever percentage of our students who are not approved for online via parent choice or medical, we have to take those students, and 50% of their instruction has to be face-to-face.
Okay.
I know how confusing it is, so no wonder
How is
the
it?
community is
It's not
confused.
too.
Nope.
How is that measured?
How is the 50% measured?
Yeah, so like say elementary kids were in class for 7 hours for 2 days, and that's 14 hours. And then they were at home doing 2 days of 4 hours of work. That's 8 hours.
So
17 is quite a bit.
Yeah, Dr. Hawkins, do you want to speak to that? It might be,
Sure.
I certainly can. It might be.
No,
because
I'm
he's
happy
got-
to.
Yeah.
I'm more than happy to. Yeah. So I am not sure what our submission requirements to the state will be through CASA in order to document how we're logging those hours. But essentially, we will be required to meet a minimum of 1,080 hours. We already have a contract with our teachers for a certain number of days. So we have a finite amount of days that we have to get to a target number of hours. And and from the math of it, we already know that no more than 50% of it could be in remote learning. So again, we have the variables, if you will, fairly well determined in order to do the calculations about how much time needs to be spent face-to-face and online, so on and so forth. Doesn't mean, of course, that the board couldn't make decisions to adjust the calendar. Doesn't mean that we can't make decisions to use days differently. Doesn't mean we can't make decisions to start and end school times at different times during the day. But again, there are some of those variables that have been determined for us. I don't know, does that answer your question, Director Beerbaum?
Yeah, and I think more generally, my question might really just be, it seems like there is some leeway there, as you said, because the number of hours we normally have more on our books than we would need, and the length of school days and all that. So maybe the more general question might be, I know you guys were originally wanting to do 2 days a week for all students and flip it in the middle of the week and have Wednesday off. What's your current, now that you've thought about it for a week and a half, best idea of how to meet the requirements, but still kind of have some of the spirit of what you're originally trying to do to allow teachers
Sure.
to have planning and things like that?
Is it okay, Superintendent Reisner, if I continue with this? Great. Okay. Okay, so we sent our staff a survey today with 2 options that we want their feedback on, and those 2 options we believe best provide what you just described: an opportunity to build in planning, to meet the state requirements of 50% of online instruction, and to meet our required 1,080 hours. Essentially, those options look like this. Option 1 looks like having students come to school, and I'm going to talk about groups of students. So an A group of students and a B group of students. It looks like each group of students coming to school 2 days for 7.5 hours of learning time and a half hour of lunch. So a pretty long day, which would then equal 15 hours for that group. And then the other 3 days of the week, matching that 15 hours with some work done asynchronously, or at least not on site. The delivery model is still being discussed as well. So that would be one option. That would essentially mean that students wouldn't report on a Wednesday. So staff would have that whole day on Wednesday to focus their energies on the various tasks that a hybrid model would call for. The other model essentially asks students to attend every day, either an A or a B day, but Wednesdays included. But we really boil that time down to the minimum needed in order to get to that 1,080 hours. It would essentially call for students to be on campus for 6 hours and 40 minutes. That includes a 30-minute lunch, so 6 hours and 10 minutes of learning time. Again, multiple days a week, and then also logging approximately 6 hours and 10 minutes of learning time. I shouldn't say logging, because we're not expecting a log to be turned in. I apologize, that was poor terminology, but spending 6 hours and 10 minutes learning remotely as well. So essentially 6 hours and 10 minutes of learning every day, whether you're on site or at home. That too then builds in some extra time in the day, each day, rather than having it on Wednesday. That builds in time each day for staff members to focus on the various demands. So we put that out to our staff today, and we've been discussing it with our building admin and trying to settle in on if hybrid is the right way to go, what hybrid option best meets both staff and student needs.
Jeff, can I get a clarification? Sorry, on the second one. I think I was busy writing down the times and not listening to some of the others. So students attend how many of the 6 hour and 10-minute days in a week?
Well, we would need students to report every day, one group of students to report every day. So we would not be able to have a Wednesday off for staff option. Mm-hmm. So in other words, if you were an A student and right. I were a B student, you might attend 3 days on site in week 1, and right. then I would only attend 2 days on site that week, and then we would switch roles.
Okay.
So within a 2-week period, we would both attend 5 days on site, and we would both be doing 5 days of learning it in a remote fashion.
Another option,
I thought that's what it was. So,
and another option could potentially be, again, there's various models that you could use, but you could also then we've heard of districts who are doing all A kids week 1, week 2, all B kids, and then back to group A, group B. So for a full week. So there are various models within that, but our time and our responsibility to meet that 1080 doesn't change.
And just to be clear, we did ask our staff about that that rotation, if you will. Do you prefer an A B? Do you prefer an A B B? Do you prefer a whole week? We've also asked that question in our brief survey of staff.
So where would early release for elementary fit in here?
Jeff, do you want to talk about your hours?
Yeah, sure. I'm more than happy to answer these questions. Just to make sure that I'm very clear, Director Benkin, when you say early release, do you mean for professional development, or I want to make sure I'm interpreting the question correctly.
So for elementary students, school ends on Wednesdays early.
Thank you.
So they weren't going, they were going at least a half a part of the day Wednesday anyway. Is that now off the table? I'm not hearing that in your numbers.
Thank you. Yes, we would need to redesign how professional development works in either of those hybrid models if a hybrid were to be the model of choice. So to further your question, the high school typically has used full days, oftentimes falling on a Monday, for a model for professional development. That too would need to be changed to fit one of those hybrid models. Again, if we were in a hybrid delivery system. So the early release on Wednesday, again, in option 1, where students aren't reporting on Wednesday, there is no early release because they're not reporting. If we are in option 2, there wouldn't be the same early release. Every student would be released a little earlier than what they typically have been, but that would be occurring every day, not just on Wednesdays.
I just want to make, I have one clarification from an earlier question. So we have applied for the online waiver, or have we not?
So there is no such thing as an online waiver, I found out. It is permission to go online. So the wording is, I guess, really important to the Department of Education, I learned. So there's an idea that there's a waiver, but there's not. You have to have permission be granted in order to go online, fully online. That permission will be granted only when we meet the requirements, or requirements isn't quite the right word, but we meet the measures of the metrics that are being developed by the Iowa Department of Public Health, in conjunction with the Iowa Department of Public Education. So they're developing the metrics, they put those metrics out, and then we would say, okay, we're, I don't know what those metrics are going to look like, but I could guess that it would maybe have something to do with, okay, in Story County, we're at 11%, and that meets, that puts us into this area of the metrics. And so, that along with maybe, a 10% absentee rate or something would put us into the ability to request that online. And then in consultation, the Department of Education and the health department, state health department, in consultation, would then decide if they approve our building or district to go online. We do have the authority back, or we kept the authority to be able to put a student in quarantine or a classroom in quarantine. So we can put a student or a classroom online if a student tests positive.
Okay, 2 things then. The first one escapes me, but the second, so we can close. So we have, because we didn't have the authority before to close a classroom, and now we can. Oh, I remember my first question. And do you know when the metrics, have you been given any indication on when those will be ready? The one that the state is doing.
I know. They say the first week of August. Fingers crossed. They say the first week of August, so we're hopeful that they'll be released the first week of August. I think all of us the superintendents, directors, everybody across the state, I think feels like we'll see. But that is what we have been told. And Jamette, I actually forgot to make clear, you asked the question about, did we apply for the waiver? Yes, we applied for what I believe, but the application process hasn't been developed. So what I did is I did a written narrative about why I believed we needed to be granted permission to have that slow return, like Director Bankin had talked about. And I wasn't allowed to make that request. They weren't able to grant me permission for that because the way the Senate files, their interpretation of it is only the Department of Education and Department of Education and Health Department have the right to make that determination based on the metrics. And the metrics aren't out yet. So, and then whatever model we're in, it's either going to be we're all online or we're 50% of our instruction of those students who don't have that waiver have to be face-to-face. So yes, I did request it, but we got no as the answer.
What about the districts that have decided to go ahead and do online anyway?
Yeah, I can't speak to that other than, I think that there is question as to what will they really say. I mean, will they really, when push comes to shove, do online and say, oh, well, we're not going to abide by the law. I don't know. I can't speak to that. So, and I would want to be very careful about putting the district in a position that we would be penalized, because I think in the long run, it would be very detrimental to our students. So I have to kind of separate, how I feel about what's being done at a state level and try to come into compliance for our district while still fighting for that. But I feel like we need to come into compliance while I'm fighting, because I certainly don't want us to have the penalties that may come along with that, like funding impacts that could be significant, loss of accreditation, things like that.
How many extra days do we have in the hours that we've got built into this calendar? Because, I mean, is it a possibility to delay the start of school? How long? That kind of thing.
So there's some, we have discussed the delay. So that delay, the discussion of the delay would be just simply pushing school back so that, we could be prepared or better prepare for, because this is coming late. We still haven't got the metrics, so we don't even, have any idea about that. We have 58 additional hours, I believe, within our current model, as if there was no coronavirus. We have 58 hours. One of the things that has come up is that there are some districts that are going to go with a 5-day a week, but have an hour late start every day, so that staff can, work that the other group in terms of lesson planning and different things. We have decided as a team in our district that approach is a risky approach, because they're banking on the fact that they're hoping that we won't go more than 58 days. If that, for us, we wouldn't go more than 58 days in a hybrid model. I don't feel comfortable making that call right now. And I wouldn't be comfortable saying to my board, we're going to go into a model that we really can only be in for 58 days throughout the entire year. Because if we got to the end of that and had to then go to a different model, teachers are having to, prepare for this, prepare for that, and then prepare for a whole new model. And that's just not a good strategy my opinion for our district.
Superintendent,
So-
would it be okay if I hopped in real
Yes.
quick? Okay. So Director Perez, just want to make sure that I'm being clear about one thing. The state indicates that the measurement of the required number of hours is measured based upon the building that logs the lowest number of hours. So the lowest number of hours in our district has to be kind of our answer, and not every school building, because lunch times vary and attendance time varies. So not every building logs the same hours. So 58 hours of overage time is based upon our lowest building. Other buildings have more overage than that. So I wanted to make sure that point was clear. The other point that I wanted to make sure was clear was that 58 hours is generated in a model where our students come to school more per week than what's being proposed in the hybrid plans. And so not only would, under that model that Superintendent Reisner just said would be pretty risky, would the delay of those days or hours present the risks that Superintendent Reisner just addressed, it also is going to put us in a mathematically challenging place to get to our total hours, because unless we're planning on the ability to return to a quote unquote normal time schedule 5 days a week, it would be a challenge to make up those hours without additional days. So I wanted to make sure those 2 points were clear.
Can I ask?
Real quick, I'm sorry, Michelle, I'm going to do real quick, just because I see, for a point of clarification for our public, when we do board work sessions, there is no public forum time. And I understand the discussions we are having tonight may generate a lot of questions from our public, and we realize that. But I want you to know that we will not take, I'm not ignoring you, but we won't take public comment, because that's how we do work sessions when we have them. So I encourage you, if you have questions or you want to share some comments, please, you're welcome to email any of us or Superintendent Reisner or all of us. We certainly welcome that kind of communication. So sorry, Michelle, go ahead.
My questions are going to seem kind of late because I was having trouble getting in, but I just want to make sure that I understand, and I apologize if I'm just being a little slow here. But you said, I thought, that the 50% is the 50% of kids who've opted to come to school, less the kids who are online. Is that right? So like, for example, if there's 100 kids and 50 say they're going to do online, then you have to, 50% would be 25 of the kids being in school. Did I get that right?
You got the math right, but that was good. But it's that, so that's where it's confusing. No, not necessarily. So the 50% isn't about the number of students. It's about the number of time that you're face to face. So we could potentially have, let's just say we have 70% of our families select online instruction. We're only left with 30%. We'd have that whole 30% come to school.
Oh, I gotcha. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Good. Oh, I'm glad.
If that 30% would be 100% in the building.
That 30%. Sure. Yes. 30%. Right. Yep.
Okay.
I mean, that could be, or
Right.
we could divide that into 15% and 15%. But the 50% that the state talks about, that is in relation to
The total number.
space time.
Okay, got it.
Yep.
So you had said you want it to be as flexible as possible for parents to opt in and out of being online or going to school and then deciding they want to be online. So how can you manage all that variance? And how do kids handle that? Because I think those are some questions that people are having, like who's my child's teacher in both scenarios?
Great question, and definitely one I think that families must be wondering about. So here's what I'm going to say. I anticipate that we'll have to put some guidance around when families can opt in and out or change models. But that guidance, we want it to be as least restrictive or prohibitive to families as we possibly can while they're understanding the plans, because this is really confusing and I don't want a family to be stuck in something. That being said, we also, like you brought up, still have to manage a building and staffing and student numbers. So the date that we gave, I think this is important clarification, the date that we gave about August 17th is a hard deadline. Between the 17th and the beginning of school, we're not going to be able to approve additional switching around, because we have to be able to do the staffing that goes into this model, and that's going to be really complex. We then may move to something like, okay, at the beginning of every month, we would allow for families to opt in or out. This is an example, by the way. We haven't gotten to this point, but there's going to have to be some guidelines so that we're not, one day we have this group, that's not going to work back and forth. So there is going to have to be some parameters. In terms of kids not knowing their teacher, or families wondering about who their teacher will be, I think that brings up a really good question that I've heard. And the question is, so if my child is assigned to this teacher, but I then opt online, will I get that same teacher? And if I opt fully online, the answer is going to be probably not, because what we would be asking our teachers is to teach fully online and fully in person. And we're not going to do that. If we have to do that, it's going to be as little as possible. So we will have a set of teachers that will be teaching primarily online. And then we will have a set of teachers that will be teaching primarily providing the face-to-face instruction, and then for the AB schedule.
So one thing that's been coming up is that with the email that came out on July 23rd, where you're trying to get some numbers of people who already know that they want to be online, there's a lot of parents who don't feel that they're really in a position to make that decision because they don't know what the district's plan is. And now with your explanation of the 50%, it even becomes more confusing, because that 50% number could change and determine and make people's decisions change once they know what that is, if that's the hybrid, if that's what you choose. So I mean, I think parents are feeling kind of very confused and uncertain about what plan to even choose, and then feeling stuck when they find out more information. So I did want to put that there. And then I had one other quick question.
Michelle, before you move on, could you explain that a little bit more? I don't understand the point that you're making. Could you help me understand the concern?
So I had parents asking me about filling out the online form now when they didn't feel they had enough information about what direction the district was going. And so they didn't know if they wanted to be online until they had that information.
So they don't have to fill out the form now. They'll have that information by at the latest August 10th, and then they'll have 7 days to decide.
Yeah, that's what I told them, but they were still confused. Do you have teachers who only want to teach online, who are not comfortable coming back to school? And if so, will they be given that opportunity? I think Jenny froze.
Jeff, do you want to take that question? Oh, no, she's not frozen anymore.
I'm sorry, I spelled froze. I spelled froze wrong in the chat.
We got you. You're moving now, so go ahead.
Yes, I know. I was going to put, I froze. Hang on, let me reboot. I'm so sorry. So I will let Jeff answer that, so Michelle doesn't have to repeat her question. Sorry about that.
I'm more than happy to. Yep. So we have sent out to staff a form for them to request accommodations, which could look like needing to teach online. And we'll be working person by person through those request forms through our HR office in order to determine how can we meet both the employees' request for accommodation as well as the job responsibilities that we need to see. So I don't know that I can give you a blanket, yes, everybody who feels like they want to teach online can, but we certainly have a process to try to match need with the need of instruction with the need of the employee.
And this is Kristen Johnson, sorry. If I could also just chime in here. I have been looking at we've had about 33 requests so far, and there are a few who have asked to go exclusively to teach online.
Have we had a lot of parents fill out the online form?
Yes, I believe we've had somewhere around 530-ish, I think. I'm sorry. Let me look. I can tell you really quick. No, I can't.
512.
512. There you go.
So I just want to come back around to something we said in the beginning. We've been on for 50 minutes now, and I have just not heard an explicit focus on students that we know are vulnerable in the learning environment. I am incredibly concerned. And I think as this conversation goes on, I get more and more concerned. I think that these are the students who are already, for a variety of reasons, not through any fault of the district, but kind of get the short end of the stick. And given that, I just worry, given that it's so easy for them to get lost in the shuffle and fall through the cracks, now that the bus that's already moving, we're changing the tire on the bus that's already moving, but now the bus is actually on fire. I'm worried about those students in the school. I'm wondering if someone could speak to how we are intentionally going to ensure that we do not worsen the disparities we know exist, how we're going to watch out for students who aren't forced into the school setting because they can't receive services at home. Where is the equity in this plan?
Dr. Jones, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, but I wanted Darcy to go first because I know Darcy can speak to the most vulnerable students first, and then I'll come behind her.
Yeah, happily.
I'm sorry, I didn't see Darcy unmute. I apologize for that.
No problem. No problem. I believe the document is on page 14 of the Return to Learn. Is that correct, Jeff?
Yes.
Okay. And that is a document that we'll talk about part of the students I believe you're referring to. And it has a variety of questions that would direct a team to recommend a student attend 4 days instead of 2. And it's not just special ed. However, I will tell you, it has a large emphasis towards special ed. So does the student participate in alternate assessment? Many of our students, and I've heard someone reference a level 3 program, if many students that are in a level 3 program are on alternate assessment. Does the student primarily use a nonverbal mode of communication? Does the student have emerging English proficiency?
Darcy,
yeah.
Just so you don't have to run through it. So I have it. I
Okay.
actually had it pulled up in preparation for this meeting. So, what hasn't been communicated then is this was when we were planning on the AABB hybrid. Is it then the plan that these students would come 5 days a week? Or are you still planning for them to be 4 days a week?
I would anticipate however many days the building is serving students, they would come. Now, I just always want the voice of our teachers in the room as well. And it will also depend on how many of our students choose online learning totally. So, but if the other students, if we're in a Jeff talked about, sorry, Dr. Hawkins, talked about some students could come Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday one week, and the others Thursday, Friday, and then reverse that the next week. I think we really have to talk about then, so those students come 5 days. I really want to see what data we receive to see how many of those students also, due to being vulnerable through their health and other reasons, that could be online, and see if we have to make sure if we have certified teachers to provide that instruction. But it would be our goal that they come as many days as the building is open.
So based on what you're saying, and I'm going back to what Director Colton said when we very first started about many families being confused about what we're actually doing, special ed has a very distinct group of students, right? There's a finite group of students. Has the district made efforts to reach out to these families specifically and ask them the questions that you're talking about now?
We will be, and we will be in the near future. The guidance just came from the state last Tuesday. I have met with Kristen Orton, the regional director for Heartland AEA. I'm meeting with her team again tomorrow to talk about the professional development that our teachers will need for special ed specifically, because the state is asking us to, they've added another page as such to the IEP, and they're asking us to meet with families and so this is going to be going out to teachers listening, hot off the press before it's gone out. But we will be meeting with families prior to school starting, somewhere between August 5th and school starting, where we will be talking with them, not about how, we don't need to know what the board's going to decide on how we start. We do not need to know that, because the state is asking us to go in and treat the IEP as a fluid document, and on this page list what we will do no matter what mode we're in. So if we start in a hybrid, what will it look like? Meaning, how much will be face-to-face learning on the computer? How much will be face-to-face if we're in the building, because we're in the building maybe less days depending on the model. So they have to look at the hybrid and decide what that will be. They have to decide if there's additional accommodations that they need to do because of the technology and those type of things. So they will be setting up meetings with every family. Our secondary did this a little bit last spring because we were in required learning, although we did it last spring with little guidance, and now we're going to have more guidance, and they're going to have some training as a team. So we will have those meetings prior to school starting. I can't guarantee we'll have them prior to the 17th, but like I said, it doesn't matter. You're having the meeting to talk about whichever one I choose, what will it look like?
That's what I'm trying to understand. So Jeff took down the slide, but like, I think second from the bottom was, it would be recommended, or, if the student had evidenced, extreme regression, right? There's been a significant regression during periods of interruption. Is that something that will be determined in these week of August 5th meetings? Or are you saying that a parent might choose online, and then whatever assessment is done, the district will actually reach out to that family and say, hey, we know you want to be online, but we would actually recommend your child come in person?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. But let me tell you where that question is in a typical IEP meeting is it's already in the IEP. When it comes to extended year services, that's one of the ways we determine extended school year services. So we would already have data to say yes for some students who have already qualified. That's a very low number. So what you point out is a great example of, well, never before has my child really regressed during a typical summer or a typical winter break. But this started in March, And we are already to November and we're not making gains back at the rate that typical peers are. Would you reconsider, we as a team need to reconsider the 2 days to 4 days.
Dr. Binkin, I just wanted to add that one of the important things I know from my end is to make sure that there's a personal communication with our families, and when we send out that communication, that it's clear. And so, as you've heard already, it's almost like this waiting game to get more clarity and guidelines. So we got to wait till August 10th to be able to get clarity on the decision that the district will decide. And then we can make sure that when we're communicating to parents and families, that the communication is clear. And so what I mean by that is that now we utilize our success teachers, our ALP teachers, our teachers that have families that they know who have struggled academically, as well as in behaviors in our district. Now there can be more of a personal communication with those families. As well, getting our district in the routine of making sure that when we're communicating information out, we're also considering and putting in a process for our families where English is their second language. And so making sure that that is a smooth process in how we're communicating with our families. So we are approximately a week behind in getting a complete response from our EL families. And so again, it's us figuring out that process to make sure that we're communicating clearly with families, and then making sure that we can get the information back. The other side of that in regards to equity and families and students who have struggled with disparities in our current system, I am monitoring and paying a close attention to other districts and states who are monitoring the other side of the equity issue. And that's with families of students who are experiencing the good side of not being in school. And so what I mean, the good side of it, so it's this thing around, where we got to reach out to, when students return, we have to be prepared to address trauma and social emotional issues, where there's a lot of surveys and writings that are coming out now that specifically our Black and Brown students are increasing in their confidence because they're not in a school environment that has caused trauma. And so that is something that is interesting to me. And so I am waiting to see the demographics of families who respond to say they're going to choose online instead of face-to-face. And then we can have more, I want to be able to look at that data a little bit more to look at a different approach with that. And so those are some of the things that I'm looking at as we look at our return to learn plans and our families who respond to say they're choosing online versus face-to-face. And I want to drill down a little bit more to understand why they're choosing online versus face-to-face.
I think one thing I would add as well is the graphic that Dr. Hawkins has up right now, or the guide. This was written under when we thought that we had local control over our hybrid model. And if that changes to 5 days a week, or after we get our survey back, we will obviously go in and change the dark gray boxes on the right to match with our hybrid model.
Thank you both. I've been resistant to moving up the vote date because I know Jenny's been pushing for it, but they should have put Darcy and Anthony on the agenda, because what I hear you saying is you need the board to make a decision so you can do the job, you can do your job and take care of these families. And if you're waiting for me, I don't need you waiting on me. I'm ready to vote. I know we can't vote today.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
You kind of had the same observation, and the thing at a high level that I keep hearing is we need to be planning in the next couple of weeks. Families are having to choose, and they want to understand, and they want to feel comfortable, and they want to understand what's going on. The teachers and the planning involved in the logistics of who can teach where and when and how the numbers look, all of that is kind of waiting on not only that vote, but these metrics that by the time the metrics come out, the planning really needed to be done. And really, I don't trust that the state government won't change the metrics a week later after they have somebody say they don't like the metrics. So from my perspective, I really think we should be deciding on the model that we start with as soon as we can, so that when we're asking these questions, for example, like I love when Jeff gives answers because he always hedges in the right places when he needs to. I don't want him to have to hedge, you know, like that's something we as a board can give some clarity on and give some coverage on, is saying, you know, this is a model to start planning for. And then hopefully we can have sanity went out with the governor in August once numbers start coming in, and maybe we could have the ability to go to other models too. But
I think, Alan, oh, sorry, go ahead. I'm so sorry.
I guess the one thing I'd say is, I think we could move up that timeline. I'd be totally for it, right? One thing I think would be important, and I don't think we've seen yet, is to have that vote, have that decision. I think we need some sort of justification for why we're making that decision, preferably based on data that we do have available. I know Jenny has been working with the Story County Health Department, things like that. I think we need to have something, right? I mean, we all have the same reservations and hesitations, but I think we need to have some data or justification, like I've seen some other districts do.
And I think in one sense, unfortunately, your ability to choose from a bunch of options is gone. So you really have two options that you're choosing from. So, you know, I said it last time, based on the data that I had a week ago, I told you I would be making the recommendation that we would begin in hybrid. I haven't seen a change to that data, a significant change either way. So now, in fairness, I haven't looked today. But I would be using that data that Story County Public Health has in relation to some local data that I get from the health department. One of the things last week that was shared with me was they are seeing a new trend this was last week. So I realize that may not carry through this week, but last week they began to see a new trend in positive COVID cases in 2 to 14-year-olds. And so, you know, I have some data that I can work with them on providing to be able to make for a decision, to help the board make that decision.
So I guess that'd be the board discussion then, right? Maybe here asking each other, you know, like if we had some data and a recommendation, would the other board members here be comfortable with moving that timeline up and helping to provide that clarity? I mean, I'd be willing to do it like even still this week myself, but what do other people think?
I absolutely agree in moving it up. I think people need clarity on both sides, the teachers and parents.
I still feel like I have a few questions, and I don't know if Jenny can answer them. So I guess part of my question is I'm still trying to wrap my mind around. I hear that we really don't have any options. I get that, Jenny. But what I'm trying to understand is, what are we really inviting our parents back to? And that's what I feel like, because I think even what Director Colton said earlier, there's just not any clarity. And so part of what came up, I think Michelle has asked this question twice, and I have not heard a decent answer. I shouldn't say that. I didn't mean it that way. I don't know if I've heard a really clear answer. I have heard a question being asked about sports, and it's not clear to me what would happen for a parent who chooses the online option if their student will be able to participate in sports. Are we having sports? And if we are, how does that align with this MacGyver duct tape Jenga system that we're operating to try to keep COVID out of our schools?
So did I freeze when she asked that question? I didn't hear her ask that question.
No, that question has been asked several times.
Oh,
it's not an accusation, Jenny. I think
I didn't hear that.
What I had been hearing hearing is we're waiting on guidance from some agency that has too many letters in its name.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So here's what I know. If parents, I don't know what that agency's guidelines are still today. I don't know, because I don't think they've come out yet. But regardless of that, what I know is that if this child is participating in fully online by parent choice or medical, they are still 100% eligible to participate in sports if we have sports. So that's that.
So a child could, in theory, be on campus 5 days a week. I have no idea how long people practice, but in theory, a student could be at home for school, yet on campus 5 days a week because they are in a sport.
Correct.
Okay.
One of the things that, and I want to say this, it is a very interesting dynamic if the student, this is being discussed at a higher level, at legal level right now, but it does bring up a very interesting point. If a child is under a medical waiver to be receiving online because it is too dangerous for them to be in the situation where they could be exposed. So there is some, currently we have been given the up, they can participate. It would be something that as a local body, if we felt if the child was at home for medical reasons and wanted to participate, we could ask for a doctor's note saying that they are comfortable releasing this student to participate. Again, these are discussions that are going on higher than us, but as of today, right this minute, 100%, regardless of either way, whether it's parent choice or medical choice, they would be eligible to participate in athletics.
And the decision of having sports or not having sports, it is coming back to the board, right?
Yes, correct. So I did clarify with legal because I had seen, well, I'll just say Chris had put out or had shared with me just a state statute. And so I did clarify with legal, and they said the board that does not apply in situations where there is an emergency such as a pandemic or another, even a natural disaster, that the reference to that statute is for normal educational programming. And right now, all of the normal educational programming guidelines have kind of been waived, or been waived isn't the right word. See, I did it again. Not waived. They have been modified. So it would be within the board's right and to somewhat responsibility to vote on that.
Is that per sport or a package deal?
Well, that's a great question. So it could be per sport. Let me give an example. Football could be, you could say football is too much of a close contact sport, so we're going to approve like whatever they're doing. I'm sorry, I could look at my email, but virtual football or whatever that is. Like there's like virtual athletic leagues or something now. So that would be an example. The board could say, we feel okay with cross country because athletes can socially distance, but we don't feel okay with, and they're not in a locker room, they're not XYZ, but we don't feel okay with football because of the close contact. I'm not in any way making any recommendations. I'm simply laying out what the board can do.
Would there be any other activities included for board approval other than sports, or would it only be sports?
I think I haven't.
So that statute applies to all activities in sports. So I would assume the guidance would be the same, Jenny.
Yeah, I think what she's asking though is it's a more practical question. I think what she's asking, a more like, yes, of course the board has the right to approve or not approve. You're saying, I think you're asking, are there activities that could fall into the range of not being safe?
Yes. I mean,
Yeah.
are there, what will you bring to us? I'll call it for the approval, but yeah, is there anything beyond sports?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm. And I don't, maybe you can't answer that right now, right? I mean, my mind's just trying to think through, when do you start and stop with this board engagement on those things?
I think that what the board would do is approve a plan. So, within that plan, I think what I would recommend, so this plan would be a plan that probably Judge and the middle school athletic and activities directors put together. And this plan, in my vision, what would probably be easiest is if they went through all of the fall ones, just, and here's the plan for, here's the safety plan, and here, and then the board, it's up to the board then to act upon that recommendation.
And my understanding that from Judge's comments a week ago, that he wants to understand what those guidelines are, to understand from the associations, to understand the staffing capacity has all of the stuff that goes into managing our activities for our students.
Yep.
Okay.
I would just be really interested in hearing that, Elisa, and having that brought to the board, because I think, like Superintendent Reisner said, given that this is really a different scenario, we are really putting so much investment in terms of everybody's time and the district's finances and our teacher stress and anxiety into creating a learning environment in which people are not only physically safe, but emotionally safe. And so I think the board's responsibility to figure out, is there something that we are also allowing that's contradictory or that even jeopardizes this very special ecosystem? You know, I think it's important that we do have that conversation with as much actual data as possible.
And I think, just for a clarification, where my mind goes is there are other things that we may want to pay attention to because of the concerns that you just said, Monique. So I certainly, when we're going to all of this effort to manage our environment and make it as safe as possible, what are those things that need to be taken into consideration? I don't know them, but I'm sure staff can provide some guidance on that.
So that's an important point. I don't know if you were on the call yet, but before you got on, we were having a just chit chat with Jenny. And I was talking about how much I appreciated that really exhaustive document that she sent us. I don't know if you had a chance to read that, where she answered all our questions.
Mm-hmm.
And part of what it says is, it does say music, choir, and band is ongoing. So if that's not correct, and so she talked about revising it before it went to the public. And so if that's not correct, or you're saying you want that decision brought to the board, then that just needs to be edited before it does go to the public.
I was actually just going to ask that same question, because I think there's pretty good evidence of singing being a very strong transmitter of the virus. So musical theater, choir, I don't know about bands, but I know what some universities are doing around those things, and was really curious to hear what the plans are there. And I think it's a valid point of whether or not that might not be something that we take into consideration.
I think these are kind of, in my mind, kind of all examples of why I was saying it might be good to help come up with that high level delivery model decision sooner rather than later, because really what we're talking about here, I think, are kind of oversight of some protocols within that, you know, because like we're talking about what's it like for activities. Another one I know we've talked about is, you know, what are the protocols as far as if there are positive cases? Really, I look at it as, you know, what are the protocols as it relates to, you know, that grid that Jeff and Darcy had up as far as who has additional services beyond that. And I think that's kind of the next level the board I would like to see. I don't know if anybody else would, is I don't want to in any way micromanage or get involved in the details of those things, but I think there's kind of a little bit of oversight responsibility of just understanding what those are. And to me, the spot we're in right now is the questions we want to ask, we can't get answers because the planning can't be completed because we haven't made the first decision. And I think anything we can do to help make it easier for those decisions to be made and that clarity to be given, so all the staff, all the families can start getting those details, understanding those details.
I think my last final question might be, is there any update on childcare options? I think that is something that would be on families' minds.
Great question. I have a very long, lengthy email that came this morning that I have not had time to go through. I don't know if it was copied to any of the other directors because I opened it and saw it was really long and knew that I wasn't going to be able to get to it till tonight. Did that come to any of the other directors? No. Okay. I see a no on Chris and no on everybody. Okay. So I will, I apologize for not having that refreshed in my mind. I believe we are meeting again. And that meeting may be this week. And, but once I read that email, I will try to be ready to answer those questions again. We did have a request for some partnership in funding for the Boys and Girls Club, and Chris and I don't think I've finished the response back today to that, but we are not able to use our funding in that way. That would be a violation of what we can do with public funds. So in terms of being able to do partnership and funding, that's not possible for us to do.
I don't mean to take us back, but I think I interrupted you, Superintendent Reisner, when you were talking about what we have regained control over, like the closing of if we have a student that tests positive. Can you speak
Sure.
to that? Thank you.
I don't think you interrupted me. I probably just trailed off. So we do have that authority. So when the original proclamation came out and then the initial guidance, we were under the assumption that we didn't have it, but they came back, they clarified, yes, we do. So we do have local control to close down a classroom or put a student in quarantine with consultation with our local health department. So between the two of us, we would be able to do that, move a class into quarantine. And that's a huge help for sure.
Do you mean, I'm really happy you asked this, Jamette, because I had a question. So when you say class, can it be classes?
They said classroom.
Well, because, in elementary school, that's easy, right? They're very much in a classroom bubble. Once they get into middle school and high school, they're moving throughout the school. They're changing classrooms, they're changing teachers. So then how do you quarantine one classroom that a child may have been in more than one room? So is it the classrooms that the child had contact with, if you do contact tracing?
Yep.
Or is it or how do you make a choice?
Right. Great question. I don't know. Would be my real answer. I don't know. What I do know is this. They're going to be very limited on the amount of, no, I shouldn't speak. They've indicated that there's going to be, they anticipate being really swamped with contact tracing. So any help that as a district we can provide, that's great. So we will do our best to help that process of contact tracing. But that is where we are in need of help. And so we have, upon board approval, we have a emergency management coordinator that will be putting those processes together for us. The recommendation to hire is a PhD nurse who has experience in this area in large systems from Florida, hospital systems and other things. We had a really strong pool. And so we are hoping that person can hit the ground running once, if and when board approved, and they will put that system together for us. with a lot more experience than we have.
When you said we, they indicated being swamped with contact tracing. So that's the local, so Story County swamped. So we would take the ownership of our contact tracing throughout our district.
Not
the ownership. Not the word you wanted me to use.
Yes, no, not the ownership. We would be glad to assist in that.
Okay, so
and that is, yep, that assistance will look like, we're going to have seating charts. We're going to know where students come and go, traffic patterns, but we're not, we will do our best to help with that. But there's there's my understanding from ISU, there's quite an extensive process to that training to do contact tracing and take full responsibility. And we are not staffed for that or trained in that. So we'll help identify names and paths and who sat by who and help make contacts, but we are not able to do that. I want to also reassure the public, this came up, I think, on the document, but that I shared with you all, but we will, and I want to say this again and again, we will absolutely, if a child in a classroom that you have students in or a teacher tests positive without being able to identify who, we will make contact with parents by phone and by email immediately. So if we find out, at 3:00, we'll do our best to get those phone calls and emails out that evening, as well as if it happens during the school day. So I want people to feel, as assured as they can that will happen. Not that that's a great, call to get as a parent, but we will be doing that.
Based on Michelle's question then, so if a student, let's say a high school student, or a teacher, that while it's singular classroom, we could potentially close multiple classrooms in a building based on the interaction or level of exposure without guidance from Iowa Department of Public Health.
That was said very well. Level of exposure is what's important. So yeah, that's really important.
And then my next level question, and I'm sorry, Michelle, if you have another one, did Department of Education or Iowa, the Department of Public Health indicate when considering a building or district level closure, what the wait time would be for that decision?
I asked that and they said, our hope is that it'll be very quickly.
So if it is locally deemed of high concern, do we know what the ramifications would be if we made that decision locally rather than waiting on the wait time?
I would have to guess, and I don't know if that's the best place for me to be, but what I would guess is that if we close down and we didn't have approval to put those students online, it would be that the hours wouldn't count until we were approved.
That seems to me like a reasonable outcome if we had to. I mean, if we have a building that we think isn't safe, we have kids not come in because of snow days all the time because we don't think it's safe. Treat it the same way. And if we have to do more days of school, we do,
And we do have approval per the proclamation this year that on snow days, we can move to a remote learning environment and count the day.
So we have carte blanche approval that if it snows an inch, we can be online. But if a bunch of kids show up with COVID in the school, we can't do anything about it. That's wonderful.
I am really, really struggling with this vote. I don't know about the rest of you, but I feel like having the online option taken away from us makes me feel like I have to compromise my own ethics. And I'm really, really struggling with that right now because I feel like, I don't want to speak for anybody else, but the safety of our staff, our teachers, and our students in the district is all of our responsibility. And I'm just really, really struggling with things like what Alan just said, for a snow day, we can go online, or the city of Des Moines, all the offices are closed, but they have to be in person for school. It just doesn't make sense to me.
I feel exactly the same way. I in my heart felt that voting to start online was the only thing that I could comfortably do, knowing that the safety and well-being of our families, our teachers, and really the whole community is somewhat on our shoulders here. So I agree with you. It's a horrible position to be in, knowing that we have to, that we're choosing between two options that I think are both risky, maybe different levels of risk, but I think they're both very risky. And I definitely have a hard time with that. Jenny, related to that, because we've had so many emails from people, even just in the last week, urging us to start online. And you mentioned it earlier, but I'm not sure people would have had to be paying attention. Can you please speak to what the consequences would be of saying, we don't care what the law says, we don't care what the proclamation says, we're going to start online because that's what we think is best? Can you just speak to why that's not a good option?
Sure. So, and just to recap, I did go to the Department of Education. So I set up a meeting with, and I didn't physically go, it was virtual, but I set up a meeting with the Department of Education. So it was Ann Lebo, the director, and Amy Williamson, and then Thomas Mays, their their lawyer there. And so I went with Les White. Les is our local public health department person that I have the most contact with. And so we went to explain our situation in Ames. We have college students returning. We were already on the uptick before that. And then, with that, we wanted to have our options expanded. So would they take our request and approve it? And the answer was no. Because they can't approve any of those requests until the metrics come out and we're closer to the beginning of school. So once those metrics come out, they would then, in consultation, if we made the request in consultation with the Department of Public Health, and the Department of Education would make the decision whether or not. If we say we don't care, we're doing it anyway. Believe me, I want to. I mean, that's not this. I'm holding, my what personally I feel from what I think is best for the district. We could face really significant ramifications to funding. And in the long run, that is going to greatly impact our students and our staff. So I'm not in a situation where I feel it would be appropriate to make a recommendation to the board that could result in significant cuts in funding and, even things like accreditation and different things that are really important. I just don't, I feel that would be irresponsible on my part. Now, what I will say is that I will continue to fight while we are bringing our plan into compliance. That doesn't mean I'm not going to continue to fight. So I'm going to continue to beg, and I'm going to continue to make those requests, and I'm going to continue to put pressure on. We sent a very strong letter to the governor and to the Department of Education around the Urban Education Network. So that is the large school districts in Iowa. We sent a letter that went out, I believe, on Friday. And we used strong language about where we believed the proclamation was in violation. And so I'm going to continue to advocate and continue to fight. But I want to also bring our plan into compliance for now, in case we don't win that battle. And I don't want to see us slapped with sanctions that could, put people's jobs in jeopardy and other things. So
Thank you for that. And I just hope that the teachers and the families and the community understand that when we're voting, we may not be voting what our heart feels is the best thing, but we're voting for what is necessary to ensure that the district can continue moving forward in future years as well. So I don't want to do anything that would jeopardize next year's funding, that would jeopardize our accreditation. So even if I don't like the choices I have to make, I will vote for one of the choices.
Now, that said, there's nothing that says we can't have a vote of which choice we're going to do, but have a different vote of which choice we wish we could and still have it on the record. Say, like, because they're just two motions, right?
Like a
So
symbolic
I
vote.
think, yeah, I think we should have a vote about what we really would like to do, just so everybody can be clear with that.
I appreciate that, Alan, but I feel like part of what I've been hearing is about all the confusion that's going on, right, in the district and how parents are already confused, and I don't want to add to the confusion just so I can feel better, right? I guess what I need to hear from Superintendent Reisner, what I would like to hear is I don't really know if I've heard a pronouncement of safety yet, right? Because part of what I'm hearing, I thought what Director Shields-Cook said was really important, because what I've been hearing from our community over the past 2 years is that they are trusting us. They are trusting us to lead them to a good place, right? A place that we believe is safe. And so for Superintendent Reisner, I guess I will just ask you point blank. Do you believe, given the planning that your team has put together, that our students and staff would be safe in the hybrid model? Did I freeze? It's quiet.
No, I'm
Okay.
thinking about that. I think that's a really important question that I don't want to rush to an answer on, because several reasons. One, we're not done with planning. We have a lot more planning to do. Like, I can't tell you today what the implementation plans are at the building are, because I don't know what they are yet. They're not done. So I haven't seen those. I haven't read them. I haven't talked about them. I haven't asked questions. So sitting here today, I feel like I don't have the information that I need to say yes or no. I certainly did not go into public education to put teachers or students' lives at risk. So if in any way I'm doing that, I probably would want to step down, because that's not at all why I went into this.
That's not what I'm saying, because I can hear that. None of us are here because we want to harm people, right? What I heard Director Shields-Cook saying is, and Director Beerbaum is, I'm the governor, not Jenny. The governor has put us in a position to choose between whether or not we want to be shot or poisoned. And so the vote is whether or not we want to be shot or poisoned. And so I guess what I'm saying is, is the message then that we should be sending to our community is, the governor has basically said parents get to choose. We don't think this environment is safe, but we have to show up. So send your kids if you want to. Good luck. I mean, is that what we should be saying? Or should we be saying, nobody wants to be in this situation. We've done the best to mitigate. Fingers crossed for everybody. Like, that's kind of where I need to know where we are.
I think that our building implementation plans will be very strong in the safety of students, especially elementary students, is going to be acceptable. What I don't know that I can say is our staff. So, I'm struggling a lot with our secondary students for the very reason that we brought up tonight. I forgot who it was. It might have been Director Linkaitis, maybe. I can't remember, but I'm struggling with our secondary and our middle school students. There's too many kids in the building. There's too many classroom switches. There's a lot of variables that we don't control. In an elementary setting, you control those variables because they're little, and you don't, you very intentionally don't let them out of your sight. And so that gradual release as you go up in the grades, that's where my nervousness really takes over, because I don't believe I can say to the public health department, here's the path this student was on all day long. I can't do that. And so I would say my fear of students being in an unsafe environment, secondary would grow. Elementary, I feel like we're going to be able to take some pretty good mitigation steps. But my staff, yeah, you're going to be surrounded by a lot of kids who could be carriers.
So I think as we continue to, get closer to the vote, whatever it is, it sounds like there's only one option on the table, but I guess we're going to still act like there's something to consider, but that's fine. I think that once you have your answer, your vote, that kind of public information campaign would be really helpful to hear, to lay it out just like you did. Look, this is not ideal. It's not our preference. It's not, as to get what Alan said, not what we would have picked. Here are the legitimate risks. This is what we're trying to do. If you can keep your kids at home, we would please ask you to do so. Like that kind of public information campaign might be the next step once you have your vote.
That's a great point. Mm-hmm. I just am so sorry to the community and to the board that we are in this situation as a state. None of you went on the board to, this is not what any of us wanted. And so I feel, I just feel like we've been dealt a tough hand here, not just Ames, everywhere in Iowa. And so are doing the best we can, but certainly putting families or people at risk is not what we want to do. So I appreciate, I guess, the permission from the board to speak very openly about that when we get to that phase, because I think that's important to hear from the board, that type of message is okay to send if that's where we're at.
Can I request something else? Can we put the request for online education for the parents to fill out? Can we put that on the main page of the website?
Yeah, I did. Yes, absolutely. I don't know where it's at currently. I just know it's on there somewhere. So we'll find where it's at and put it on that main page.
You said you had 512 applications for online. Is that 512 students?
I'm going to assume so, because everyone has to be individual, I believe.
And just remind me how many students we have.
Mm-hmm. This is a great question. Chris and I were just talking about this the other day. Do you want our certified? Chris, you can give our certified.
So we count about 4,700. We serve about 5,200. So the 5,200 would be what you want.
So we're at about 10%. In how many days?
1, 2, when did it go?
2 days.
It went out on Thursday, so not very many days, and we're at already 10%.
I would have thought we would have been higher, to be honest.
I think there's some wanting more information before they make that decision.
Which is a great reason, right, to do that sooner rather than later, probably.
Yeah, I agree with that, particularly at the high school level. It's uniquely difficult to make that decision, not knowing what classes might be offered online and what classes might not be, are all of the foreign languages, all 4 years offered online? What about AP classes? Those are the kind of things that I'm hearing from people that are waiting. They don't want to take their kid off of the AP science track if AP science classes won't be online. So I think as we get more information out to people, they'll start responding.
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's not just those classes. It's the technical classes too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That kids enjoy, but can't really be online.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Jenny, is it possible, in thinking through this timeline, when is it? I just pulled the timeline up here. Is it more helpful to have, in thinking through as families are making their decisions, if we were to move up the timeline for our decision on this, is it more, with the building implementation meetings, I think that's what they're called, the building return to learn meetings, would you move those up, or would it just be giving you more time? I'm just trying to think through with the families and their decisions that they need to make. Those meetings are currently set before the August 17th due date, decision date.
Yeah,
How do you think that would impact that? I'm just
yeah, very good question. I'm going to ask Dr. Hawkins or Director Mixdorf if they have any insight on the progress on those plans, and if we would be at a place where we could move those meetings up. And I apologize that my son chose to mow the lawn in the middle of a board work session.
You can't hear it. So.
Okay, I'll keep muting back and forth, but
he can come to my house next though. So
okay.
I think another piece that is important to consider is that I keep hearing about people sending the children back to school because they need some normalcy, something, they miss their friends. I think it would be important to be honest when we're talking about this honest thread, that school is not going to look the way that it did before March. I worry about the expectations that we're having as a community, that we're sending our children back to school. It's not necessary. It's not going to be the same. And I worry about that. I worry about the students that do online only, because they will be more isolated perhaps than they're now, because some of their friends will be at school and they will not. So I just as a thought to keep communicated with the parents, like maybe I think it was at the middle school, I was at the return to learn, I think it was laid out in one of the middle school. I was thinking, I listened to Principal Jonas talking about what would the middle school look like. And I thought, oh my goodness. So I think that would be important to push out as well, so people know what to expect. That's just a thought. There's a lot of things that have been said. I'm trying to catch up. So yes, I support, let's move it up. If that's what the district needs, if that's what it can be done, I'd be okay moving the date up to what for the decision. And granted, the decision is just an oxymoron. I would not have decided, I would not have picked that, right? Like some of my fellow board members have said, it is stressful. It keeps me up at night. It's not ideal in any shape, way, or form to be in this situation, in this town, with all the students thinking about, we only have two options. You go to school or you go to school, right? So other than the parent choice. So I think I'm caught up with, one thing, okay, last thing. I was thinking I think Director Beerborn was making like a wish list, and I want to add something to it. I think it would be helpful for the board to receive or to have an ongoing document of what the expenses are connected to COVID. So for instance, how much are we spending on putting the hand washing stations in every classroom? How much? I think it would be good for us to see like a running total of what those expenses are. The mask, the face shield. I would appreciate seeing something like that on a regular basis.
Yeah, we can easily put that together. Great idea. And then I want to just go back to one of the first points that you made, because it was excellent. And, I think our minds are like constantly trying to problem solve and figure this out. And how do we do this? And how do we do that? And we very rarely, I am so sorry about the lawnmower. We're very rarely, kind of take a breath. And I feel like you made a great point to communicate that school may not look like what it will not look like what it did. And I think that's really can you not hear me? Oh, you can. Okay. I think that's really important. So thank you for that reminder.
One thing I was thinking about, and it was because of some Director Perez and Shields Cook said, you know, at the beginning of this meeting, I had brought up how I think the sooner we make a decision, probably the better for planning, and we need a justification for it. We need some way to, you know, say this is why we are saying that decision. One thing I hadn't thought of is something that the state ended up doing is by delaying the metrics and us not having our own metrics yet. I really don't have any good handle on how bad or good it is right now. You know, like I'm not necessarily comfortable with any of the options because I have no data to tell me what is the risk. Like,
oh, I have metrics. I
think that's
hard.
That's something we need to start. Let's start just sharing those out with the board as part of the justification then, because we need to understand that part. Like, where are we actually
I'd be happy if somebody cared about the hours upon hours that we went into putting these metrics together that now aren't going to be used. So I would be happy to share that and for it to be part of what guides the board's decision.
I think that would be great, because
you're going to wallpaper the bathroom with the metrics.
Yes.
Decoupage.
I mean, in a way, once we get into August, I think then we're going to have metrics in hand that will be based on really what we're observing in our schools and in our population of students and families and staff. And then we'll have a much better way to think about how bad is this. And yeah, I mean, it's not going to be great either way, but
I think
that's something I'd like to see.
I would echo that. You know, you can, I guess I want to understand through your eyes, Jenny, what is our current reality in terms of COVID data and what you're utilizing, because we need to then have that awareness, because I know we all talk about we don't have much of a choice, and I get that, but will we have a choice at some point? I don't know, between what is in what we've been granted the decision point on. So understanding that now and continuing to understand that as we go throughout the school year, because this is just, I mean, we're starting in August, right? The last day of school is not till June. And so this is potentially our reality for the entire school year. So having that understanding would help me as we navigate this throughout the entire school year. So I think what I'm hearing, I'm trying to give you all wait time if there's anything.
I had one more question related to what you said about elementary school. And this might be part of the implementation plans. And I've read so many articles recently that I don't remember if I've read anything about AIMS specifically, or if I'm thinking of something else. For specials teachers at the elementary level, will that be part of the in-person instruction, or would that be part of the online instruction, or both, just because of the amount of contact they have with different students throughout the building?
So not to sound like a broken record, but some of that depends on our decisions that we're making.
Thank you. I was just going to call on you, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Christy, did you have more to say? It looks like
am I back?
Oh, I know. There you go. I was going to say, I think you just froze. Do you want to complete your thoughts?
I did. They were really good, but I will now share them out. Can you hear?
Yeah.
Can you still hear me, or am I breaking up?
I can hear you.
I think I'm frozen.
You're back now. You're back.
I will continue, and everybody's frozen, so maybe somebody say something if you can't hear me
we can hear you. We can.
Okay. Sorry, it keeps coming across as that my network is unstable. Apparently it quits.
Yeah.
Okay. We are working through some of those decisions specifically in fine arts in general. Some of it will depend on the options that Dr. Hawkins talked about earlier on the hours of our day, and if we are shortening our day, will that have impact on fine arts? And we haven't made those final decisions. I will be meeting with our fine arts department later next week to continue this conversation because we think we'll have more information on the model that we will be choosing, as well as some of the safety components of it and what our recommendation will be.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Christy. Any other comments from anyone?
I was earlier, President Franson, you'd asked a question and Jenny had asked if we could weigh in on whether the building implementation teams are at a place where they would be ready to move up their meetings. I just wanted to provide an answer on that question. And Ms. Mixdorf, I would invite you to weigh in as well. I know you've been meeting frequently with principals. The meetings that I have held with folks tell me that there's significant progress being made, but they are not ready yet to hold a meeting. I know that wasn't exactly the question. So I have a difficult time anticipating how much earlier they could go. The plans that have been shared with me as I review them, again, I would say significant progress has been made, but they still have some pretty important things to work out as far as how will we accomplish certain things. So I wouldn't be comfortable giving feedback today. Maybe this is what Vice President Beerbaum was talking about when I appropriately hedged my answers, but I wouldn't be comfortable today saying that they are ready to move up at this time.
And I don't want to, in my question, don't want to imply that they should be moved up. You all need to determine based on the decision that the board makes, if we adjust the timeline, you all need to determine that. So it was just a question of curiosity to better understand the work that you are doing. And I will not pretend to understand all of the complexities that go into planning all of the different days at the different levels. So,
yeah, well, I think the reality of the fact that decision-making, planning, information to parents, decision-making on their part, all of this is interwoven in a time frame that is dependent upon each other. And so it is a very reasonable question, you know, if we want to move the time frame of approval up, can we move those meetings up as well? I think it's something we can pursue with our staff. It's just not something I'm ready to commit to today, but I certainly appreciate where the question comes from.
Yeah. So I think what I am hearing, go ahead, Jeanette.
I just have a thought that it just occurred to me, and it's because we as a board, this is for the board members and Superintendent Reisner, we don't talk really, like this is the opportunity for us to talk as a group. I was wondering, just because the comments they have said here that we all feel uncomfortable with the fact that the local control has been taken away, would it help? Have you, President Franson, heard of any boards voicing their concern as a body, not as a district, but as a body, as a board members? Would it help for us to come up with a letter? I know we have a couple of amazing writers in the crew. Would that help? Is it just symbolic because it might not make any difference? I wonder where, if it's something that we could do. We definitely don't want to get you in trouble, Superintendent Reisner, obviously. I kind of would like to know if that's a possibility.
You would not get me in trouble at all.
Okay.
But thank you for that.
Good.
I don't want you to either.
Okay, good.
No, you would not get me in trouble at all.
But even if it is symbolic, I would think it might be important. So it's not just superintendents, but it's boards too.
I actually saw the Cedar Rapids, I think it was in the Gazette, the Cedar Rapids School District put out a statement. It was basically the text of that UEN letter, which is fine. But yeah, other boards have done that.
Yeah, so I don't have any, we have not had a president's roundtable through IASB since all of this information came out. So it would be through any of my informal contacts that I have been made aware of frustrations, but not aware of any actions any boards are taking. And I think that everyone got IASB's the update that they sent. Oh, I'm trying to remember what day it came, but I believe that we all get those updates in terms of the work that they're doing and the questions that they are asking of the Department of Education and of the governor for further guidance and information that they desire, and sharing some concerns as well. So I'm not opposed to anything. I just don't know. I am not aware of any organized efforts between boards that are taking place.
I guess how would everybody feel as doing that? I guess.
I would completely support doing that. Yeah.
I think it's
When
a
I
great
said an
idea.
awesome, oh, thank you. When I said awesome writers, I was thinking of you, everybody. You're all super good writers. So I don't know, how do we go about doing that? Just because of the 4, we can't communicate. How would that work? The logistics of it, I guess.
Yeah, I wonder if that's why Cedar Rapids, which I have a colleague I keep in contact with over there, but maybe I wonder if that's why they chose to support the Urban Education Network, some of the dialogue from that letter that went out. I don't know.
Yeah,
just
right,
how you, yes, I'm trying to think through what the logistics of it would be as a board and honoring our open meetings law.
Yeah, that's the tricky part.
Is there any interest in reaching out to other boards and having it more than just from us, or do we think just, I'm fine either way. I just am bringing that up because that was mentioned by somebody earlier too.
If we're having a tricky time deciding how we're going to do it, I think it at other boards would be, we're sending that tricky time to them, and I don't want to delay it. So I think for now, maybe they'll follow suit. For now, I think it will be good.
I think, what you could do is you could reach out to IASB to help maybe facilitate it if you're stuck. But here's what I would say. I think we have a brilliant board, and I think that what you develop is going to be really good, and I would develop it yourselves. That would be my recommendation. Because there always is a little bit of politicalness when you're dealing with organizations such as IASB. They have a legal foot in the door in different directions. And I would say writing it from your hearts as board members would go a long way.
I do like what Director Binkin mentioned as her example of the idea of releasing it more to the community as well, just to make it clear to the community what our thoughts are. So I think that sounds like a great idea.
Sorry, Jim. And we can definitely share out, I'll have Eric share out publicly the letter that the Urban Education Network superintendents drafted and sent, so that the public can also see that one. I do think it's important for that too. So thank you for bringing that up.
But just to Alan's point, just real quick. So I am happy to sign anything. I'm not writing anything. I'm in the I'm saying no mode. I'm working on me. I'm saying no to everything. Tell my friends, my nobodies, because they'll be really proud of me because I always say yes to stuff and then I get behind. But in terms of communicating to the community about what we all want, I think what I understand we want is the ability to make choices. I don't know if as a group we have consensus over what that would be, right? But I think we do, what I think there is consensus about is that we want to be able to make the decision that we think is best for our community. And to me, I think that's the message that we could all agree on.
Right, the fact that we lost the local control. Yep, I agree.
Yeah, and that's what I liked about the UEN letter, for example, is that's really what they focused in on, was that aspect of it. And it's too bad you're learning to say no, Monique, because I was really going to say this would be perfect for the policy committee. That's a group of people that love to work on writing and make sure sentences are perfect.
So I actually already sent the governor a letter. I wrote letters to anybody who was elected. I sent them a letter. Check your mailbox. You probably got one from me. And so I'm happy to just send that to the group. And if anybody wants to use that as a template or take bits and pieces, have at it. No reason to recreate the wheel.
I'd
Are we
agree.
able-
Probably- oh,
Okay, are we able to collaborate on a Google Doc, or is that questionable? No? Okay.
Actually, I mean, I think you can, because we've done it before, right? We did it in the equity committee. So maybe with the rest of our time, maybe we want to, is it 3 people? You can have 3, maybe 3 people want to group together and then run with it.
Yeah, a portion of the board can. I interpreted the question that all 7 of us would work on it. A small subset of a board can collaborate on a document.
Jeanette, I'd be happy to work on it with you if you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I would love to volunteer, but I'm going to be in Monique's camp and just say no.
Sabrina,
I'll
we
volunteer
got
to read
this.
over it.
Oh,
but
okay. There we go.
Okay.
Well, to read over it, I can't write it because I'm also saying no, but also the things I would say wouldn't be appropriate. So you guys are much better at that side of it.
Okay, so Director Benken, send your letter, your best letter to us.
I'll send you my letter, and I'll send you the story from the Gazette that shows you the template of what Cedar
Brilliant.
Rapids did. I'll send it right now.
Okay, okay. Director Shields-Cook, we got this.
Got it.
And then we'll send it to all of you so you can read it, and maybe we can put it on the board agenda.
Yeah, so I think it could be, we can plan on that being on our August 3rd. Is that too soon? I saw some eyebrows go up, but that is our next meeting. So that would be the first opportunity for that. So that brings me to our path forward, and where I believe what I am hearing is there is a desire, if it is helpful to the staff in the district, to move forward in providing a decision. We are all willing to do that. What is August 3rd a time? Is it Superintendent Reisner? Do you want then? Do you want, I heard somebody suggest later this week. Help us understand what is helpful for staff and what we as a board can accommodate with our calendars.
I think that we could be ready to bring it forward this week, or August 3rd. I mean, I don't know. Without would it be okay if we talked as a team tomorrow, and then I will reply back to you, Elisa, and let you know moving forward what the best kind of time frame would be. This would be a special meeting that we would call. So if there are any dates that would not work this week, just in case we do bring it forward this week, would you please let JD know? And then just we'll have that checked off in advance.
And I think given the meeting notification requirements and wanting to be able to provide our public the opportunity to understand when we will be having that meeting, it may not be feasible this week. So
Right.
I certainly understand that's a pretty quick turnaround. I just did not want to take that off the table should it be something that you desire to do as a staff.
Thank you.
That said, I think, unless I'm reading everybody's faces wrong, that tomorrow morning at your 9 a.m. meeting that you have with everybody, you could just be saying, we're planning for hybrid.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That is where we've been. That's where we've been headed. But thank you.
And I think
to let JD know our availability. Would this be an evening meeting or a daytime meeting? If we had it this week.
It's really, it would be just that one item. What do you, what?
I guess I would propose keeping it in the evening just for accessibility for folks who may have daytime commitments. I understand that people have commitments anytime in the day, but because most of our meetings are in the evening, I think that it would be appropriate to keep it at the time. Would be my thoughts, but feel free if anybody wants to push back on that. And so what I am thinking, so you will bring a recommendation, Superintendent Reisner. And what I heard from some members was helping us to understand your justification or your understanding of our situation and why you bring that recommendation would be very helpful. Even though we're all appearing to have an understanding of some things, I think that would be helpful for when we do have that meeting and take that vote. Any other thing, one thing I will say, I do see some hands raised, and just as a quick reminder to our public, we during work sessions, we don't have a public forum. It is an opportunity for the board to dive into a topic and gain a deeper understanding of it. So I am not ignoring the hands that have been raised. Please, though, if you have questions or thoughts for us, certainly welcome you to email us and Superintendent Reisner. So any other things from the board? Have I recapped that in a manner that you find helpful? I'm honoring the discussion that we've had this evening. I do want to say that Director Benken, when she was referring to some of the concerns that you brought up initially and others have reiterated, and giving Darcy Cousins and Dr. Jones the opportunity to walk us through the chart and continue to help us better understand that, I really appreciate. I have really, this entire situation has been incredibly difficult, but you really think about those kids that really need us. And so I really appreciate that you brought that up and we had the conversation about all those kids that everybody needs school, but we really have some kids who really, they need the support and the expertise of our educators, because that's what they do. We have people who are specially trained to help our kids. And so I really appreciate that you brought that up tonight. I know that it has been on all of our minds, and appreciate the conversation and the questions that everybody has brought tonight. Does anybody else have, sorry, I didn't mean to go there, but I did. Any other questions or comments from anyone?
I just want to thank everybody for coming together on such short notice to have this conversation. I appreciated the candid nature of the conversation. I know that it's probably easier to say some things that make people feel better or happy or whatever, but just really being honest about all of the complexities here, I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, seeing no one else hitting their mute button to talk, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Moved by Shields Cook, seconded by Perez. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Thank you very much, everyone, and we will be in touch on our next meeting time should one be needed this week. Thank you,
everybody.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank
Good night,
you.
everybody.
Bye.